Hi, and welcome to Excel Heaven. I came across a property of named ranges in a book by Jordan Goldmeyer, which fits perfectly into something I covered in a previous tutorial, Lookup 3 in this series. But first, a little explanation. I hope you're going to love this. Say I have a simple range and name it range 1. So, highlight the range. In the name box, I enter range 1. I know that I can then use that named range in formulas. For example, if I want the sum of range 1, it's easy enough. Just enter equals sum and the range name. However, if I just use equal and the range name, I get a value error. What I didn't realize before was that if I am in a cell in any row covered by the range, I can use equal range name. And it returns the number from the range that is in the same row. I can apply this to all the rows. I should point out that this only works if the range occupies a single column. So what, you may say, but this little trick opens up a whole new set of options for us in the structure of some models. Needless to say, if a range is over a single row, I'll call this range 2. It works just the same. On the Formulas tab, if I use the Show Formulas button, you can see that the same formula returns different results. Your spreadsheet auditor will love this because it demonstrates a consistency in your formulas. So how can I use this in a practical way? In the Lookup 3 tutorial referred to earlier, I used a sample of a management report to demonstrate a model which can be updated on a monthly basis and provide different views of the inputs depending on the requirements of various managers. If you wish to review the structure of the model, please refer to the Lookup 3 tutorial. As you can see, the report shows the results for May. But the June figures are now in. And by changing the reporting period on the reference sheet to 6, the whole report, including headings, updates. If, for whatever reason, I wanted to see an earlier period, no problem. Just change the reporting period. You will notice that I use the technique of putting the row offsets for the HLOOKUPs into a column of their own, and refer to these cells from the HLOOKUPs. This allowed me to produce 2 reports by simply changing the sequence of the offsets. In this new version of the model, I'm going to make a few changes. The first thing is I want to make a distinction between the offset column, which just indicates the number of rows each figure is from the top row of a range. If I select, for example, the year 2015, the column on the left, that is column A, you can see that no formula actually uses this column directly. This column is just for reference purposes. The numbers run without break from 1 to the last number in the particular range. This applies to any range that figures are drawn from. The same applies to each year. When I move to the current year sheet, however, I have a change. I still have a reference column in column A, and in the original model this was the column used for the offset value in the HLOOKUPs in the table. But I now have an additional column to the right of the table, and this is the column I am going to use in my new model. The first thing to do is to name this range. Normally, the quickest and easiest way to name a range is to use the name box, but I don't want to use it in this case. Instead, I am going back to the Define Names group and the Define Name icon. The reason is that by default, any range name that you enter is applied to the workbook as a whole. I'll accept the default name. However, I want to restrict the scope of the range to the current sheet, CY in this case. When I go to the last year sheet, I can do the same. As there is already a range called Offset 1, I have to enter the name, remembering to use an underscore, as Excel won't accept spaces in range names. Once again, I restrict the scope to the current sheet and click OK. If I display the name manager, you will see that I now have two ranges called Offset 1, but the scope of each is restricted to the appropriate sheet. Now for the fun bit. If I look at the formula in F4, you can see that the row index number in the HLOOKUP element is pointing at A4, and similarly all the way down for each row and column. What I'm now going to do is change that reference to the new range name Offset 1. You will note that only one instance of Offset 1 is displayed because the other one, which we know is there, is specific to sheet LY, so sheet CY just doesn't see it. You will also note that the whole of the range in column T is highlighted rather than just T4. I can now copy the formula down and across to complete the table. Checking any other cell shows the same formula. So what has really changed? The beauty of this technique is that if I now look at all the formulas, the HLOOKUP element is consistent throughout, apart obviously from the reference to the month number in each column. This reduces the risk of errors creeping in particular in getting the mixed reference wrong in the first place. By placing the range to the right of the table, it also allows multiple offsets to be used in more complex models. But there is of course a mixed reference still there in the month numbers. So let's go for broke and make the month numbers a named range also. I select the month numbers and selecting the define name icon, I'll call this range Offset 2. And again restrict the scope to the current sheet. I can now change both reference to the month number to Offset 2. Copy it down and across. If I again look at all the formulas, they are all exactly the same. Let's take a moment to just review this. What the formula is saying is, if the number in the Offset 2 range in this column is less than or equal to the reporting period, do a HLOOKUP for the number in the Offset 2 range in this column on the actual 2017 range, and use the row index number that is in the range Offset 1 in this row using an exact match. If the number in the Offset 2 range in this column is greater than the reporting period, return 0. I can take the formula on the CY sheet and copy it to the LY sheet. When I do, I am warned that Offset 2 already exists, so I can say yes to use the LY version, and similarly with Offset 1. I need to change the year from 2017 to 2016. And again copy down and across to complete the table. Now for the report sheets. On the cost heading sheet, I can highlight the range in column M, and using the define name icon, I can again call this Offset 1 and restrict the scope. I repeat the exercise for the region sheet. Now looking at the name manager, I can see that I have 4 ranges, all called offset 1 and 2 called offset 2, each restricted to its own sheet. So now let's use these. Back to the cost heading report. If I look at any row, I can see that where values are being pulled in from the current or last year's sheet, the row index number is using the figure in column A. So if I highlight the cells in row 9, I can use find and replace to change references from A9 to offset 1. I now copy the row to the other rows, ignoring the totals. I also have to update the formulas for the text in the total lines. And that's that. If I now look at column A, I can see that this is no longer used, so I can delete it. I update the region sheet and I'm done. I hope you found this technique interesting and that you will be able to use it in a variety of situations. It is particularly beneficial in the development of a complex model like a budget or business plan, where you have multiple input sheets which are being pulled together onto a calculation sheet. For example, employee numbers for various grades by the projection of associated salary rates. Please do come back to Excel Heaven for further tutorials and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.